get off the hamster wheel of creating art just for Instagram. There's a better way that won't leave you burned out. Hello friends, let's get into another Q&A video. Today I'll be answering all of your social media questions while I finish up this cute little ghost illustration. By the way, if you missed the last Q&A, I'll link it above. Okay, the first question. You wrote that it's getting harder and harder to connect on Instagram these days. What did you mean by that? I know that Instagram is still often the most recommended platform for artists to focus on. Do you think that's changing? Okay, so this question is in response to what I wrote in an email to my newsletter subscribers. I mentioned that I wanted to do this Q&A series to hopefully start conversations and connect here on YouTube because it's becoming harder to do so on Instagram. Well, what I meant by that is Instagram is very different for artists now in 2022 than it was 4 or 5 years ago. It used to be much easier to engage with other artists and get to know each other and support each other's progress. And don't get me wrong, there's still 1 or 2 niches where this is still possible, like within some illustration subsets. But for example, the giant community of lettering artists that was thriving 4 years ago has almost vanished, at least on my feed. As I'm sure many of you have noticed, the new algorithm is making it much harder to connect with people you actually follow, and I follow tons of lettering artists. Only about 10 or 15% of the people I follow show up in my feed these days. You know, everything else is either ads or suggested posts. And when I share a post, only a small fraction of my audience sees it. So it's like we're all on our small Instagram islands surrounded by ads and dance trends. You know, it's definitely not the same experience as back in the day. To answer the second part of that question, should artists still focus on Instagram? Well, it's certainly become much harder for artists to build and in some cases even maintain an audience on Instagram now, because when the platform deprioritized photos, it essentially deprioritized artists. But there's not another great option right now. So I wouldn't say artists should avoid or ignore Instagram. I think you should still post work there and have a presence on the platform, but I don't think it's wise to rely on Instagram exclusively. The next question is, how do you balance social media with your art and your business? Or how do you manage your time on social media and still get things done? Well, to be honest, I didn't really do a great job of balancing it last year. I couldn't share many of the client projects I was working on at the time. So in order to post consistently, I was creating art for Instagram. So I was making art for topics and events that were current, like I did a series of posts surrounding International Women's Day, I did one for Pride, I did one for Juneteenth, and so on. And I also did a couple of drawing challenges. So a lot of the art I posted was made for Instagram. But then I still had to do client work and make Skillshare classes and all of that other stuff. So as you can imagine, I was burned out by the end of the year. This year, I decided to work smarter instead of working harder, and it's been much easier to manage. So I no longer make art just for Instagram. Anything I share has to have a dual purpose. For example, the drawing prompts I share in my newsletter every month not only serve as a creative resource for subscribers, but the primary purpose of the art I create for those prompts is so that I have a mini collection to send to my agent so that they can add it to my licensing portfolio. Then, of course, I can also use that art to post on Instagram. Another example is when I do a drawing process video or tutorial here on YouTube, I can take snippets of that video and edit it for an Instagram reel. So basically, I'm trying to be strategic about what I create, and I'm trying to make each thing serve at least 2 functions. So my suggestion is to get off the hamster wheel of creating art just for Instagram. There's a better way that won't leave you burned out. Think of your long-term goals first and then fit Instagram into that plan. The next question is, what does your weekly schedule look like for your content creation? I'm actually in the middle of switching this up now that I'm paying more serious attention to YouTube. So before, I was posting to Instagram 3 times a week, roughly Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, but it wasn't always set in stone. And honestly, I would usually make the art a couple days before I needed to post. Now that I'm making more YouTube videos, I need to do a bit more planning and have more of a set schedule, which I'm still figuring out. I'm thinking my upload day will be Wednesdays on this channel. and I'll post a preview of the same content over on Instagram on that same day. And I still plan to also post on Instagram on Mondays and Fridays. Probably I'll do a still post on one of those days and a reel on the other day. So yeah, I'm still figuring out my schedule, but I'll let you know when I land on something that works well. The next question is, what's your method or system to plan what art and content to create for the upcoming weeks, months, and/or quarter? I currently don't have a system when I'm creating, so would love to hear from the expert. Thank you. Well, I'm no expert when it comes to content creation, but I have come up with a system. Those monthly creative prompts I mentioned earlier have been a big help in planning my content. Since I'm providing that resource for my subscribers, it forces me to plan ahead and think through what my theme will be for the following month, and then break that theme down into prompts for each week. So I go into each month with a focused direction. Now, of course, what I do is not going to be the right fit for everybody, but my advice would be to think big picture. Think of your greater goals and then break that down into a weekly or monthly plan for creating art. For example, if you know that you want to become a children's book illustrator and you need to start building a portfolio, you can come up with a character and draw that character in different scenarios for a month or even for 3 months. Then the next month or the next quarter, you could come up with a new character and build a world for that character through a series of illustrations. That way, you have a guideline for what you're going to create each month, you have content for Instagram or whatever platform you're on, and you also accomplish the bigger goal of building a well thought out portfolio. So yeah, I think the trick is to have a bigger plan beyond individual Instagram posts. The next question is, do you have any tips for creating the reels and videos you post on Instagram? I find the whole process so overwhelming. Now, I did have a little bit of an advantage with creating reels because I had already learned so much about filming and editing from creating Skillshare classes. But I completely understand that it's daunting to try to learn all of that just to keep up with Instagram. The first thing I'd say is to start simple. A reel could be as simple as flipping through a few pages of your sketchbook for 15 seconds or swiping through a few illustrations on your iPad. I actually just saw that Liz Kohler-Brown posted 5 simple ideas for how to share your art in reels. I'll include a link to her post in the description below. I think it could be really helpful. Now, even though your editing doesn't need to be fancy, one thing I will say is that lighting is definitely important. And that doesn't mean buying fancy photography lights. All you need to do is sit by a window and use natural, indirect light. And when I say indirect, I mean you shouldn't be able to see the actual sun if you look through the window, because that will make the lighting too harsh. I don't have any lighting equipment. I only use natural light in all my reels and other videos. Now, if the editing options in Reels seem confusing, I would also suggest you try editing in an external app so you can just upload a finished video to Reels. I edit in Premiere Pro because I'm fairly comfortable with it now, but that's totally overkill if you just want to post a few reels. So I'd recommend a simple editing app like InShot. It's pretty straightforward and you can use it on your phone or your iPad. I've had this app on my phone for years now, and I've used it many times for editing personal family videos, and it's probably as simple as editing software will get. Okay, my illustration is done, so I'm going to wrap up the questions there, and here's a closer look at how it turned out. If you have any follow-up questions for me, feel free to leave them in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, I'd love it if you'd give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.